Hi, welcome back to Binkerbelle's Yarning. Today is Tuesday, August 27th, not 17th. Taking away 10 days there. And it is Tutorial Tuesday. So we will go through last week's block because I finally do have one finished for you. And I'll give you a simple overview of how to do the stitches and all that wonderful stuff. But first, we have a winner for the Gray Heron giveaway grab bag. Ooh, remember, it's $110 worth of chunky yarn from Gray Heron, the Gray Heron yarn store in Belleville. Plus, you also get these absolutely beautiful stick scissors that I love. And there's my little one. Okay, so there's that. So your winner is... Hi, welcome back to Binkerbelle's Yarning. Today is Tuesday, August 27th, not 17th. Taking away 10 days there. And it is Tutorial Tuesday. So we will go through last week's block because I finally do have one finished for you. And I'll give you a simple overview of how to do the stitches and all that wonderful stuff. But first, we have a winner for the Gray Heron giveaway grab bag. Ooh, remember, it's $110 worth of chunky yarn from Gray Heron, the Gray Heron yarn store in Belleville. Plus, you also get these absolutely beautiful stick scissors that I love. And there's my little one. Okay, so there's that. So your winner is... Okay, we just continue that to the very end of the row. There we go. You might be wondering why I'm using a different yarn than the Caron Pantone that I'm using for the actual blanket. It's because the Caron has a tendency to split, and I have a tendency to swear at my yarn. So I'm using a Pentex, actually, yarn. And as usual, it is a 4-weight yarn, or a worsted weight yarn, and I'm using a number, a 7mm needle. So you can order 7mm needles in a kit, like a needle kit, as straight needles off of Amazon, or you can pick up individual circular needles in a 7mm. I haven't found individual needles in a 7mm in the retail stores that I've taken a look at. I'm sure they're out there, and I'm pretty sure you can order handmade ones, which are always absolutely beautiful. So the next row is going to be a purl. So we bring our yarn to the front, and we insert from top to bottom in front of our needle, and then yarn over, pull through, and slide off. And again, we're going to go all the way down, just like this. Now this particular block is actually from a completely unrelated Tutorial Tuesday that I was going to do. The blocks that we're doing in this series, it starts out with basic stitches. So with our first Tunisian, we were doing chains and simple stitch. With our first crochet, we were doing chains and single crochets. For this one, we're doing simple knits and purls. Like I said, it's a 4-row repeat, and it's super simple. So we do knit row, purl row, and for those that have difficulty reading patterns, K stands for knit, P stands for purl. When we do other types of stitches, I'll let you know what the short forms are for them, just so that you can progressively learn and get more comfortable on how to read patterns. There we go. So we're at the end of our purl row, just like that. As you can see the back. Okay, this is your wrong side here. This is your right side here. So our next one, we are going to knit our first stitch, just like this. There we go, and pull it off the hook. Our next stitch is a purl stitch, so we bring it to the front just like this, we insert our hook and yarn over and pull it off. And now it's a knit stitch, so we move the yarn back to the back of the work all the way across. And this is knit, purl, knit, purl. And the reason that we do the +1 stitch is so that the last stitch is a knit, so that you have even sides and minimal puckering. As when you end on a purl stitch, it tends to pucker your work or pull it tight, because purls are tighter than knits. And again, you want to watch your tension, because if you make your stitches from your previous row a little too tight, you'll have difficulty getting your needle in to them afterwards. There's another purl, and we go to the back and we do a knit. So this block is a great block for practicing your knitting and purling. It's also a great mindless one for those that already are comfortable, so you can sit and binge while you do this. Now I keep track of what row is what row based on this. Alright, so my tail are my knit rows and my knit and purl. And when my tail is at the other end, I know that they're purl rows. Now you can always use a stitch marker for that, or use a stitch counter. I just find that I get ahead of myself when I'm using a stitch counter, so I forget to add rows that I've already completed, and then I lose my spot, and things get all messed up, and I end up with weird rows and backwards patterns, and it's just not. It just doesn't work for me. Another purl stitch over. Now I would usually suggest doing this particular row in continental, so that's where you have your yarn in your non-dominant hand, and you pick your stitches as opposed to throwing your stitches. But for some reason my hands have not been cooperative, and I have been unable to do continental because it causes too much pain in my hands. It's all in the way that I hold my yarn, I think, to be honest with you. So I've been having to throw instead of pick, and I'm a lot slower at English knitting than I am at continental. And purl. This is our last purl stitch, and I made it a little tight. There we go. And then off, and our last row is a knit row. Just like that, or our last stitch is a knit stitch. There we go. So that's number 3 of the pattern, as you can see. Getting some really neat detailing already. Okay, and then we're going to purl another row. Okay, so yarn in front, and we're going to slide it underneath. And we're going to purl all the way to the end. Lost my yarn. So our next block that I'll show you after we're done this row is a Tunisian block. So we're going to be looking at ribbing. So we're going to be doing ribbing in Tunisian, ribbing in crochet, and ribbing in knitting. And again, we're going to be using a number 4 or worsted weight yarn, and 7mm hooks and 7mm needles. And with the Tunisian, because we're only doing 30-ish stitches, then the piece is short enough that it will actually fit all on a standard crochet hook. I would suggest getting one that has a little to no thumb rest, simply because it's easier to get your stitches over the hook. I accidentally picked up an extra piece of yarn there. I use bamboo hooks, which you can actually purchase individually at Walmart, believe it or not, and at some small yarn shops you can get them. Alright, so there's your last detail row, your last row in the 4-row sequence. And you just continue all the way to the end. And your last row, which gives you your 45, is just a simple knit cast off. Alright, here we are. That's the Andalusian stitch. So moving on to the Tunisian pattern. Banging the camera. So we're doing ribbing. Alright, so it looks pretty cool, eh? I always find it interesting how purl stitches in Tunisian look like knit stitches in crochet, in knitting, and knit stitches look like purl stitches. I always find that very interesting. So what you're going to do is you're going to cast on 30 loops on your hook, and then you're going to do a standard Tunisian simple stitch base row. That's how we always start Tunisian. That's how we will always start Tunisian, unless otherwise stated. But usually if we're going to do that, then it's a matter of skipping stitches or doing 2 together kind of thing. Alright, so go ahead and do your 33 stitches, and then your initial base row. If you're unsure of that or you need a refresher, then just check out Next Step Tunisian video. I'll put it in the description so that you can refer back to that video. Same thing with the knitting. I'll put in knitting for crocheters so that you can remember how to cast on and how to cast off, and how to do your knits and purls. Okay, so I've already got most of this particular square finished. So I have 2 of each color, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, this is 25. Okay, and then this is 26. We're going to do, oh no, sorry, it's 26. Okay. And yes, I've just added colors higgly-piggly. I'm not entirely sure why. That's just the way I did it. So this will be number 27. So for the first 2 stitches, as you can see the colors there, I'm doing it in a different color for you so that you can actually see the difference in the stitches. So bring our yarn forward, just like our knitting purl, and we slide it under the first bar, just like that. Pick up our yarn, and you want to go this way, not this way, because this way will actually give you a different texture. So we go behind the hook, pull it through, and leave our loop on the hook. Okay, we're doing another purl stitch, so right beside it. You got to watch your tension with this particular one, because otherwise your stitches get lost. Yarn in front, and yeah, my stitches are a little too tight. There we go. And we pick up our yarn, and there we go. There's a purl stitch. Okay, and then knit stitches. As you can see, they're in front like this, and you want to go between the 2 bars. So you go in between the 2 bars, just like this. Pick up your yarn from the back, like that, and then we do our next stitch, and then we do our next stitch, just like that. Oh, I've made a mess of it because I grabbed one of my tails. There we go. Alright, so there's your knit stitches and your purl stitches, and it's a 3x3 ribbing, so your first loop counts as your first stitch, don't forget that. So we do 2 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl, 3 knit, 3 purl, and then we do 2 knit, and then our last one, which is just the standard simple Tunisian through both loops on the end. So go ahead and do that, and I'll be back in a second to show you how to cast off, because the cast off is not the same as it is with a simple stitch Tunisian. Congratulations! So shoot me an email, binkerbellesyarning@gmail.com, with your address so that I can send that package off to you. So this is the Andalusian stitch, so I'll post the directions again at the end. What you're going to do is you're going to cast on 33 stitches. It's multiples of 2 plus 1, and this is what we're going for. Alright, so you can see the texturing in it, just like that. It's beautiful. Even the back is nice. Alright, so it's a 4-row repeat, and you are going to do 11 repeats of the pattern. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As you can see, I made a mistake here. 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10. There's your cast off, and the first one here is 11. Okay, so there you are. With your cast off, you'll actually end up with 45 rows. Beautiful. So now to the directions. So here is, I've only cast on 21 stitches, just because I'm not going to do the full 33 with you, because this is just a little bit easier. So your first row, as you'll see in the listing, it is a knit row. So to knit, remember, we insert our needle back behind the needle like this, and we yarn over just like that, and again through the back, and there we go, all the way to the end. Okay, so there we are. We have 28 of the repeat stitch rows, plus the foundation row, which is 29, and now we're going to cast off. So again, it's a 3-stitch repeat, or it's a 2-stitch repeat, but we're doing 3 stitches. The reason I chose to do 3 stitches for the ribbing as opposed to a traditional 2x2 or 1x1 is because I wanted the ribbing to be accentuated. Right, so it's absolutely beautiful. You can showcase your stitches. So again, so it's 2 purls plus your starting loop, and then 3, and then 3, and then 3, and then 3, and 3, and 3, and 3, and 3, and then 2 plus your edging, just like that. Okay, now we're going to do the cast off. So it's super simple. We're going to keep with the stitch repeats, and your return pass is always the same, so you don't need to worry about that. It's the yarn over and pull through. And again, you can check that out on Next Step Tunisian. So purl stitch, and instead of pulling through 1 loop on our hook like we would normally, we're going to pull through 2. So that actually closes the stitch, so you don't get this weird little loopy unfinished edge. Okay, and then our next stitch, just pull it up a bit. My purls tend to be a little tight. We go into our purl stitch just like that, and again through both loops. Okay, and the same with the knit. We're going to go into our knit stitch between both loops, just like that. Pick up our yarn. Done. Oops. Okay. Try that one again. And into our knit stitch. So between the 2 bars, my fingers are not cooperating with me today. Just like that. Pick up our yarn and pop. And next, another knit and pop all the way along. Through. Okay, so that's our 3 knits, and then our next one is a purl. And you can tell that they're purls because there's a bump in the front. And you can tell the knits because they are both loops through, like that. Okay, so yarn in front, insert hook, just like that. Okay, and oops. Okay. Again, yarn in front, purl stitches are tight. Pull that one out for a second here. Okay. Not entirely sure what I did here, but I created an odd knot. There we go. There we go. Made a mess of that loop, but that's okay. Alright, yarn in front, pick up, and yep, just like that. There we go. And because I made the mistake and I pulled it tight to find the stitch, again, this one is tight, so, and then doesn't want to go through because it's so tight. There we go. Okay. And just like that. There's two. My stitches are so tight. There it is. And pull through. And our next is a knit. You can tell because they're in the front there like that. Pull up our stitch and through. And pull up our stitch and through. And you continue all the way across just like that to close off your entire row. Alright, so it gives it a nice finished look. So that is ribbing in Tunisian. So go ahead and make 3 of those, and again it's 30 rows, so 28 of the work stitch rows plus your foundation plus your cast off makes 30 rows. So there you go. So next week on Tutorial Tuesday we're going to do ribbing with crochet. Now it is only one form of ribbing with crochet. There are multiple ways of doing it, but we're gonna look at one of the versions. So that's everything. Don't forget, winner of the giveaway, make sure you give me an email with your address, again, binkerbellesyarning@gmail.com, and we will see you tomorrow for We Learn Wednesday. Bye!